sold out and I need to refresh. And so I thought it would be a good time to talk about what my thought process is about doing these packs, and also a couple of other little tips and techniques if someone's interested in that, or if someone just wants to be curious about what's going on with flower packs and what can they do with them and how do I pack them, etc. So having said that, if this sounds like something that you're interested in, then I'm going to get started. I am doing this live, which means there will be no editing, so that if there's something that I'm talking about that you're not interested in, then please forward along the timeline. I will try to be as quick as I possibly can, but if you know me, you know that sometimes that's difficult. First, let me say that I do flower packs in two different sizes. This is a 5 by 8, and this is a 6.5 by 9.5. And the reason is because when I'm done, I put them uh, in a vacuum seal, and that's the two sizes that I have on hand. So if you have purchased or you do purchase from me, you will see that they come in the vacuum seal, and then you just cut the seal and then you gently slide them out flat. You don't want to be tipping them like this because then they'll fall all over. And they will have another protective sheet of paper on top before they go into the vacuum sealed container. The other question I get asked a lot is what's the difference between, besides size, of course, is there other differences between the two sheets? And when I do this, I'm thinking about scale. So, for example, this Coreopsis is quite large, and you can see that the scale of this one is a lot bigger than even the largest one on this sheet. And so, generally speaking, they may or may not, if you actually took the time to count the flowers, which I don't sell them by count, I sell them by the sheet, is they may be close to the same number of flowers, but the scale is different. So if you're doing projects like bookmarks or gift enclosure cards or jewelry or small scale items, then maybe you'll want something that has the these tinier botanicals. However, you will see that even the large sheets also contain the same flowers. Here's some verbena. It's the same size as these verbena. And so a lot of times they're interchangeable, just like these lupin. You'll see some lupin here and you'll also see some lupin here. So it doesn't really mean that you're not going to get smaller flowers on the larger sheets. It just simply means that the larger sheets can accommodate bigger things that if I put, for example, a large flower on here, it'd take up the whole sheet. You'd be buying one flower for the money, and that wouldn't be very economical. So that's one reason for the two different sizes. The other reason that I do an assortment, which is another question I get asked a lot, is how come you do assortment packs? And while I don't always do an assortment, if you're looking for something more specific, then check out the section on pressed flowers that isn't the one that I do the assortment on. And you might find some that are a lot more quantity of a particular flower. But the reason why I do an assortment is because of how I think. And let me give you an example. Let's take these two pieces of paper. See if, make sure they're in camera. So for example, over here on this small sheet, and I'm going to move the camera so there's going to be a little bit of swiveling going on, you'll see that I did put a larger scale flower on this one because maybe somebody does want it. I usually think in terms of the star of the show. If you read any of my uh, verbiage, that to me would be a star. You only need one, or I only need one, because then the other things would be supporting characters. So for example, sticking with this pack here, I might want to tuck this lupin behind. I always like to work with foliage. So here's some foliage. You might want to tuck some foliage behind. So there's the star, and then what I call the supporting characters. So this, could be another supporting character. These guys remind me of Pac-Man. I don't know why. That could be tucking out from in there. And then I love, of course, Queen Anne's lace. could be another accent. And so I like for people to have a variety of sizes to work with. Maybe you're doing something smaller. Maybe you want to do a gift enclosure card. You could take, for example, a flower about that size, put a piece of foliage behind it, put a couple of accents around it. Here's, and get, I usually try to do accents in at least 3 so that, excuse me for bumping the camera, so that people, the number, the odd number rule, which I personally subscribe to. I tend to prefer odd numbers. Not that there's any not that there's any law that you have to do it any particular way. It's your creation and you do whatever you want. And so that's basically what it is. Another thing that I like is petals. This is on one of my, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, what I call the confetti or seconds sheet, which there's not really anything wrong with it. I just sometimes I just put things on there because. But this is a bidden, and you can take. Let's move these out of the way. And sometimes I just like to put another flower over a background flower, and have the background be an accent instead of using foliage. The other thing with leaves and flowers, you can do the same thing. You can break them down. So always look at what you're getting, not as what you see when you're being creative, but also what can you do with it. So with this one particular piece of greenery, I'm going to break it down to where I have 3 sections. And so now I might want to do that, and then put this here, put this here, and then put this on top like that. And then you can have some green sticking out. And then just build on from there. Use your other accents to go forward. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about what you can do with these packs. Here's another example where this is a same thing as this. This is an oregano. And I like using the larger sprigs, but oregano you can pull the oregano florets apart, and you can use things like that for jewelry or for mini arrangements or even for accents when you want to do some accenting. And I'm not there yet, but the other thing that's going to happen when I get these pages filled up with the larger flowers, I usually work from largest typically down to the smallest, is that when I get done, I'll start taking these small little fillers, like here's a hydrangea floret, and I'll start filling in spaces, like here's a blank space. And then, here's a blank space. And start using some of these. Let me move the camera over. We're going to shake for a minute. Go over to this is the work area. And I'll start using some of these smaller filler flowers to fill in. Here's something else that I like a lot. These heather. Again, they make good accents, good jewelry pieces. And so you're going to find that in these packs, you're also going to get really tiny pieces to work with. So there's quite a variety, and you can make a lot of different projects depending upon how big your project is. If you're doing an 8 by 10 framed picture, then you can use, on a larger pack, you can use some of the bigger flowers and then use some of your accents, and you could probably get an 8 by 10, you could probably get a bookmark, you could probably do a couple pieces of jewelry, so you can get a lot of different projects out of one sheet of flowers. Something else that I do, because I call these premium packs, let me raise this up a little bit, is because I actually take extra time with the flowers that I put on here. So let's talk about the process for a minute. I just pulled some of these hydrangeas, and so to me, this is a perfect blossom. And this is a perfect blossom. But this one, you see how right here it kind of it folded over a little bit on itself. I will actually, before I put it on the sheet, is I will turn my scissors. I'll just round it a little bit because that's its natural state. And so now, see, I mean, you wouldn't even know that I did that, but I do. And so it's one of the things that helps to make these packs premium is you're not getting a bunch of misshapen flowers. Here's another example. I wouldn't put this larkspur on a premium pack because it's just all, when it got pressed, it didn't press perfectly and it got mangled and for right, wrong, or as they say, indifferent. I tend to be a perfectionist. So this would go either in the Slight Imperfections pack because the nice thing about the Slight Imperfections is a couple of things. And I said we'd talk about that in a minute, and since I'm talking about slight imperfections, here's my slight imperfections department over there. Those three in the upper left of the screen is what I'm working on. And so that'll either get into the slight imperfections area, or another thing I'll do is I will take, I'm going to use these as an example, and I will pick the blossoms off, or not the blossoms, but the petals. And then I will take, I have this small little bottle of Elmer's glue with a fine tip, and I will take one of these petals, there's a good one, and then I will take and I will dab just 3 little tiny spots like that. This is my glue paper, and then I'll set it down, and then see, to me this needs something here. So I'll set it down, and then I will do that. And now it still looks okay on the back, and then I will, to me that just looks more complete. Same here. Now I'll probably do 2 on this one. I'll probably put 1 here and then 1 here, and then to me that'll be complete. So the thing about the premium packs is I've already done all that, so you're not wasting, you're not getting a pack of flowers and going, oh man, that's so sparse, I wish there was, it was better arranged or better looking, the flower, and then wasting another flower to do your own filler, because I've already done that work. And yes, it is a little time consuming, but back to the perfectionist nature that I am. And I do that in my own personal work. And so I just know how valuable, at least in my opinion, it is to have flowers that are better formed. So that's how I think about that. Another example, let me bring this over. I'm working on verbena next on these packs. And here's an example of a flower that to me is perfect, so that'll go in the premium pack, whereas this one is not. But there's no reason why it can't be used, because, for example, if you take one of your premium flowers, you can use that as a background accent. You don't need the whole flower for your accents. And the other thing about the premium packs is sometimes the color, like, for example, let me get a page here that has a good example on it. Well, the one I want doesn't have cardboard. I'll pick it up anyway. This doesn't have cardboard underneath it, so hopefully I don't drop the whole thing. But for example, this is potentilla, and I absolutely love this flower. But some of the potentillas I have are not as they don't press as saturated as others. For example, this one is more saturated. And then I have others still that are really saturated. And so these don't generally make it to the premium. This is on a seconds pack, and this is a seconds pack. But they're ideal for color enhancing. And in 2020, this year, Happy New Year, everybody, I'm going to expand on my color enhancement playlist, so if you're something that you might be interested in, then check that out. I've only got one overview. It's fairly long, but if you want to hear about my journey and see some flowers, how they lasted over the years, then that's a good starting point, and then I'll start going from there. I've got some things planned, hopefully, for this month to get doing. But anyway, the point being, the other nice thing about the seconds packs is they make good testers for color enhancing, because you don't want to take a premium flower if you've never color enhanced or don't know if you want to, and potentially ruin it because you've done something that doesn't make the flower happy in your color enhancement technique. Whereas with these guys, if you take this for example and you color enhance it, you're not going to be too worried if you ruin it. And so that's another nice thing about the seconds packs, is that you can play around with them, or they can use them as background filler. For example, there's nothing wrong with this larkspur, and it'd be perfect for a background. But I just deemed it's not perfect enough. See, there's a little hole in there, and it wasn't, I guess you'd say, worthy of my time to try to fix it and make it a premium. And so that's what's happening over here with these what I call seconds. Um, so we talked about the verbena, what determines what's. Here's another example. Here's what I call a perfect loop, and that's how they grow nice and rounded like that. Whereas this one, you can see how it's kind of wonky on that middle petal. Well, to me, that's not premium. And so I will either put it in the seconds pack, or if I'm in the mood or I'm short-handed on them, I will actually round it out. And these little scissors come in handy. And yes, again, it's very tedious, as you can see by how long it takes. And I've got my reading glasses on, and even that's not helping a whole lot. It helps to have, I get reading glasses in a higher magnification, and I use those as my magnifiers when I want to see something up close. But now, as you can see, it's a little bit more normal. And so think about that when you're doing your flowers. And here's some more examples of filler. These will be small little filler pieces that I'll be using to fill in the little areas when we get to it. And on the Etsy site, what you see is what you get. So everything on the page that is what you're actually purchasing. So you don't have to be wondering, oh, what flowers am I going to be receiving? Here's another example of something I'm selling as seconds. This, and here's an ideal candidate for color enhancing. These guys are fine, but hydrangea is an example where, depending upon the time of season that you pick the flowers, for example, later in the season, you'll oftentimes get one that lean more green. These aren't necessarily faded in the sense, they're not old, but they just press kind of a greenish color. This is really late season, and those of you who know hydrangeas know that they will start to dry naturally, and they turn different colors. And so this is from later in the season, where you can see how deep, kind of this deep burgundy purplish color. It's beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm just going to sell it as part of the seconds pack. So the seconds pack has a variety of shading in there, and these are perfect candidates for playing around with color enhancement techniques. And you can see on this one how some of this started greening, and that's how it is. These are just natural off the bush in different shades. And that, let's see, did I cover everything I wanted to in this video? I think so. Just keep in mind that you might want to think about getting a greenery pack, just because it helps the flowers go further. if you press your own flowers, then it's a good idea to press greens and flowers. And the other thing I would say about the flowers that I press is I've been pressing flowers since those of you who've watched my channel before know that since I was a teenager. And so that's been, geez, what, 50 years, dating myself here. And the only flowers that I grow and press for the most part, unless there's something that I know that I can color enhance, and so I don't care if they fade a little bit quickly because I know I'm going to color enhance them, for example. The only thing is that these mostly all will hold their color really well. You don't have to worry about color enhancing. You don't have to worry about all of that with most of the flowers here that I sell for a while because I try to press things that are saturated in color to begin with, or I just know from experience hold their color really well. And and unless you're doing something really rare or really special, these should be more than sufficient in color holding ability for general use. And that's kind of why I press the things I do. An example would be lupin, for example. Lupin, not lupin, excuse me, lobelia. Lobelia comes in a lot of different shades, light blue, dark blue, more of a deep reddish purple, a light reddish. And I tend to always stick with the more saturated colors because if you press a really light blue lobelia, for example, it's going to fade or it's going to look more faded quicker than, say, the dark blue. And these hold their color for a really long time. So even as they start fading, you've got a lot of different tones to go through uh, before they're gonna actually look very faded. So hopefully that has helped with someone who may be wondering or thinking about buying a pressed flower pack from my Etsy shop, or maybe wanted to see if there were a couple of techniques that they could use for their own pressed flowers because you're pressing yourself. And so hopefully this has helped with that. I didn't talk about this, and if I did, excuse me, is why I do assorted. And the thing I want to say about that is, for example, let's say I don't have a whole lot of lupins on hand. Well, if I did a whole sheet of lupin, for example, then nobody else would ever get a lupin because you only can have time, or I only have time to press so many of a particular flower each year, and because I press so many different kinds, for example, I'm running short on uh, on buttercup, and so in order for people to get buttercup in their assortment pack, I have to use three or five. Typically, I'll do three or five on it because they're kind of a background plant. So that's why. A lot of times it just depends on how many flowers I have on hand, and I want to spread it around. So if somebody likes buttercup, they have an opportunity to work with a few buttercup. Uh, Instead of, as I said, if I use buttercup all on one sheet, then only one person can get it, as opposed to, say, maybe 10 people being able to use some buttercup. So that's why I do assortment packs. All right, I think I probably talked long enough, and you have a wonderful day. Thank you for subscribing. I look forward to comments if you have your own experiences or things to share. I'm sure that everybody would be very interested. I know that I am. You have a wonderful day, and thank you for tuning in.